Hi, my name is Andrew Barofsky. I'm the president and CEO of Obstetrx. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I learned a lot this morning already. I'm looking forward to learning a lot more, and I'm really excited to be able to share our story. My background, really briefly, is that I'm a former scientist. I have an undergraduate degree in biochemistry. Along the way, I became interested in patent law, so I decided to become an attorney. I did that, but actually went out and started my early years in law were in a business practice group out in Boston for a firm called Tester Hurwitz and Thibault, which long ago was a competitor of this firm. But fast forwarding, left the legal career behind to become an entrepreneur and jump back into the technology and the medical technology space. My colleague here, Dr. Kenton Gregory, we've been long-term partners. Actually, Ken hired me right out of college. My first job out of college was with Dr. Gregory. And so we've had a 20-plus year career working together on this. And he's actually the inventor of the technology that we're going to present to you. So I'll let you give a brief background and we'll go from there.
So my background is a cardiologist. As far as DoD is concerned and DARPA, I've spent about the last 30 years developing battlefield technologies and other technologies from DARPA, all the way from hemorrhage control, most recently AI for ultrasound, for combat medics, for diagnostics, mass casualty events, regenerative medicine. We start by saving the soldiers, and then we got to put them back together. So Andrew and I have been a co-founder on RevMedics and now Obstetrx, and this is really, I think, one of the most impactful things I've been able to be involved with, I think, in my career. It's very exciting.
Thank you, Ken. So our mission at Obstetrx is to eliminate maternal death due to a condition called postpartum hemorrhage, which I'll explain a little bit more about. We think we have a very unique technology platform, which gives us a great competitive advantage to be able to do this. And so for those of you that are unfamiliar with postpartum hemorrhage, it's the leading cause of maternal death throughout the world. And it's postpartum hemorrhage is where women during the course of childbirth, they literally start to bleed and they have the potential to bleed out. It can be a deadly condition. In the United States, well, actually throughout the world, the prevalence of postpartum hemorrhage is in the sort of 5 to 10% of all births. It actually occurs. It actually occurs at that high rate here in the United States and other markets like Europe and Asia. Generally, in those places, women survive, but that's because there's more advanced interventions that are available. In other parts of the world, low and middle income countries, where the technology doesn't exist or access to blood products and surgery don't exist, you really have a high prevalence of women having the potential to die from this condition. So clearly, a condition like this has really profound implications, primarily to the mother. I mean, the ultimate risk here is the loss of life, which is absolutely catastrophic. But even surviving it, it's a highly traumatic event. I have a dear friend that had postpartum hemorrhage with her second birth and actually chose not to have any more children because of the trauma associated with just going through that. It's stressful and in some ways traumatizing for clinicians and the clinical teams that deliver babies. It tends to be a rapid onset situation. It's almost unforeseeable. So during this joyous moment where a baby is delivered, a few moments pass, and all of a sudden, some of you start, undergoing this postpartum hemorrhage event where the woman starts to bleed, and it goes very quickly from something that requires caution to, we have a real problem here, and things need to happen very quickly. And for hospitals, it clearly increases costs and stress on the system. In a lot of cases, blood transfusion occurs when you have postpartum hemorrhage. That's expensive, generally results in longer hospital stays and overall increasing the costs. And actually, birth centers tend to be a cost center in a hospital system. And so they're obviously concerned about that.
One thing I think it's important, this is a disease or a condition that every second, every minute counts. About 1.5 liters blood goes through your placenta or uterus every minute. And these ladies bleed out 1, 2, 3, 4 units of blood every minute, or they can. And the obstetricians call it audible bleeding because they can hear the blood pouring off the table onto the floor. So it's a real medical emergency.
Yeah, I think you can. So actually, we've developed the hemorrhage control technology that I'll describe to you. Its origins are through work that we did with the Department of Defense to develop technology to stop bleeding on the battlefield. And so we actually formed a company called RevMedics several years ago and successfully both developed the technology to treat bleeding from gunshot wounds. We're actually able to build a factory to build the device and launch the device. And for the last 6, 7 years, it's been successfully used by the US military, predominantly with special operations forces, who are the ones that are actually been active over that period. It's a life-saving technology. We've gotten several reports from the field about lives that have been saved with it. About 5, 6 years ago, while working on iterations of the trauma product, it's a product called XStat. We were approached by obstetricians up at Oregon Health and Science University, our local medical school. We're based in Wilsonville, Oregon. Describing that they had a similar problem that had a lot of analogous features to battlefield bleeding, in that rapid onset, not a lot of tools to treat it, difficult bleeding situation. And that's what started us down the path of adapting this battlefield technology and to use it not only to save soldiers' lives and potentially civilians' lives in traumatic events, but to save women's lives as well. So the technology we've been describing, again, it's called XStat. It's a patented technology. And the way it works is that we've developed a technology where you have these small compressed mini sponges that are activated when they come into contact with fluid, and they rapidly expand. And we take these mini sponges in the trauma device, we actually place them in a syringe-like device, which allows you to insert that into a wound, eject the sponges into the wound, they expand and compress the wound and are able to provide hemorrhage control for those trauma wounds. So the same principle applies in postpartum hemorrhage, and what we've done is we've taken the technology and we've expanded it, made a larger device that's anatomically able to be able to be inserted into the birth canal and reach the uterus to apply the same sponge technology up into the uterus. And so this cartoon depicts really the treatment. You can see an actual example of the XStat PPH device up in the right-hand corner. I think you can see it. Can you see it past the candle gate sign there? And again, what it consists of is a large applicator, again, that is designed specifically to have the right length and the right curvature to get up into and access the uterus. And then you have a plunger, and then inside you'll see this large sort of sausage-shaped mesh tube, and that is filled with these expanding mini sponges. And so what you do is you take the applicator, you insert it up, and you push the mini sponge pouch, if you will, up into the uterus. It expands, and through that expansion, it has the ability to compress the uterus and get the bleeding to stop. The whole procedure can take 60 seconds or less. It's extremely fast. It's very simple. And again, it's proven technology and has the ability to both control all forms of many different forms of bleeding. And then once the patient is safe, the bleeding has arrested, it's very easy to just simply remove the pouch out back through the cervix, and the procedure's done. A little sort of close-up shot, if you will, of sort of how the device works, or the mini sponges work actually inside the uterus. These sponges have the ability to expand about 10 to 15x their compressed dimensions. So they go in and they expand up 10x plus once you get them applied into the uterus and they come into contact with all that blood that's bleeding. Anything to add, Ken, on the clinical side?
Well, they exert a pressure, a hemostatic pressure, and that's the real mechanism of action, and it happens in about 2 or 3 seconds. And it's the exact same principle for the product that we've used in the battlefield. And the thing that is important here is it doesn't take very much training to use the battlefield device, and same for this device. So most of the stuff in the battlefield is done by a medic with a high school education and a few months of training. And so this will be good for midwives for the developing world as well as for the developed world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any Department of Defense or NIH funding?
Yes, not specifically for the the version that's used for postpartum hemorrhage, but for the trauma versions of the device, we've had significant funding. The entire project was kicked off and funded all the way through FDA clearance into commercial production using Department of Defense awards. We've been funded by the Army, the Air Force, and we actually have a current award with the Navy to further expand the indications for use for the trauma device. And we've now filed for and cleared, we've had 6 different clearances for different variations of the trauma device as we've been able to modify it, improve it through the FDA at this point. And we've actually established a manufacturing facility up in Wilsonville, Oregon, where we produce the devices.
Yeah, we have a device investment and counts of supplies and not.
Yeah.
So Obstetrx received a Saving Lives at Birth Grand Challenge grant early on in its development from principally from the Gates Foundation. Bill Gates is a personal proponent of this. He also gave us development funding for some of the materials we use just to keep the cost goods as low as possible, because he envisions this as a potential important contribution to lowering maternal mortality in low and middle income countries. So those are the non-dilutive funds we've received specifically for Obstetrx.
Thank you. Let's see, am I moving?
About 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Marty, appreciate it. So getting a little bit into the sort of the physiology of what causes postpartum hemorrhage and sort of how it relates both to this device and some of the competitive devices. So far and away, the most predominant cause of postpartum hemorrhage is something called uterine atony. And it's essentially a situation where post-birth, the normal course for the uterus is to actually contract relatively quickly and constrict blood flow, shut off the blood supply that supply blood to the fetus. And that's normally what happens. But in atony cases, the uterus maintains sort of a boggy composure, if you will. That's what obstetricians usually call it, where it's not contracting. And so imagine all that blood vasculature is just sort of left open and nobody's shut off the faucet. And as Dr. Gregory indicated, the blood volumes from that can be very significant, on the order of 1,500 cc's a minute or greater of bleeding. Generally speaking, the first line of defense against this is uterotonics and some massage techniques, and try to activate the uterus, if you will, and to sort of get it contract. But if that doesn't happen, and in about 30% of the cases, there's no response to that, then you've got to go into an active hemorrhage control protocol of some type where you need to intervene. If you have and typically what you'd want to see is sort of a simple device intervention. The current standard of care, if you will, is something called a tamponade balloon. It's basically a catheter-based balloon that's water-filled that gets inserted up into the uterus and expanded. But it's kind of a rigid balloon. It doesn't really conform well to the uterus, and it's got all sorts of challenges and complications with both its application and its effectiveness. Recently, a company, I'll talk about it, a Bay Area company called Lydia, has been working on developing a vacuum-based technology where, believe it or not, you apply suction to the uterus to get it to collapse on itself, to basically squeeze it together to be able to provide pressure against that flowing blood. In both cases, typically, although those devices are used, they actually are, a lot of times, a blood transfusion is also necessary to do that. So we obviously work for uterine atony, but we also have the ability with the XStat PPH device, since we come from battlefield trauma, to be able to treat some of the other forms of postpartum hemorrhage that exists. We actually were able to, a few years ago, pre-pandemic, we were able to, we successfully conducted a pilot trial in Lusaka, Zambia. We wanted to test the device in a low and middle income country to be able to prove that it can be used in an extremely low resource setting. Very successful first in woman experience and trial. We were able to treat 9 patients with postpartum hemorrhage, no adverse events. All patients survived. No patient needed any additional intervention in the form of blood transfusions or surgeries. So really in rapid application, almost immediate blood cessation in all of them. And again, no adverse events. So really positive experience in our first in women. Our value proposition is really high efficacy, rapid placement and removal, and extremely easy to use. It's simple technology that is robust and just works. And what we want to do is have the ability to obviously have this be used by obstetricians, but down the road, even be able to potentially get this in the hands of midwives to be able to use. It's that simple, it's that easy, it's that fast.
Real quick question. In the slide, you don't need to bring it back up, but the slide before of the 9 women that were tested, what percentage of them, given the environment at the hospital in Zambia where that was done, what percentage of them would have potentially passed away because of this?
Well, there's in Lusaka Hospital, there's 30,000 live births per year. So 6% of those, there's a lady that dies, 2 or 3 of them every day from PPH, regardless of their interventions. So the lady at the bottom, where she had already lost 1.5 liters of blood, going into shock, she would have probably died. Some of the others, these are still all severe postpartum hemorrhage bleeding, but they're the death rate's around 10 or 15%. So probably at least one other of those ladies would have died. But we're catching them early. Who knows how many of them would die there? But definitely a big problem.
The clinical team there was begging for us to actually leave the unused devices behind. Of course, we couldn't do it ethically, but they were not only just impressed, they had a significant need for it. Real quick on the competition, I already described the uterine balloon tamponade, the Bakri balloon, a bit of the standard care, but again, it's finicky to apply. Obstetricians don't love it. It does work, but it requires a lot of setup. It's complicated. And there's clearly an uneasiness about the Bakri balloon system in our discussions with obstetricians. The JADA system, the vacuum-induced hemorrhage control system, it's very expensive. It's only a couple years old. It's recently launched. Again, it has a high blood transfusion rate that they reported in their clinical trials. And of course, old-fashioned gauze packing is simply just not a very effective, although inexpensive treatment. So we think we're going to have a real competitive advantage over these technologies. They're going to be more effective. We're going to be more price competitive than the new JADA system. We think we'll occupy a space in a quadrant in the competitive marketplace that really gives us an advantage.
Did you answer the question from the Q&A?
Oh, I did not
I
see
did.
that. Oh, did you? Oh, very good. Thank you for monitoring that. We actually did a voice of customer study with about 30 obstetricians, and they were very bullish on this technology when they saw it. We simply described the technology to them and asked them what their feelings would be about adoption and usage based on what they understood about it. It really, I think there's an opportunity here to actually expand the market over what Bakri is actually doing today, simply because obstetricians will use this more often and earlier in the treatment. They will not wait for patients to go into more severe forms of postpartum hemorrhage before applying an intervention, which is what they currently do today. It's a bit of a wait and see approach. And in their judgment, they finally end up using the Bakri balloon or doing something else, a blood transfusion. We envision a world where with XStat, you have the ability, look, as first sign of blood, it's so low risk, it's so easy to use, it just simply gets applied. Market potential for this, in short, it's in excess of $100 million globally. You start here in the United States, you move to Europe, you move to other places around the world. We break up the market into sort of the existing commercial markets of USA and Asia Pacific and Europe. And then there's a whole world of global impact opportunities and working with organizations like Gates to get this out there as far and wide as you can.
I thought you said 100 million or billion?
Million.
Okay.
I-
Very niche.
It is a bit of a niche market. I love 100 billion, but it's not that. But there's a lot of deal activity in women's health. A lot of I think you see some traction and excitement about women's health technologies as a market, if you will. Specifically, I think the deal that is probably the most enlightening for this particular technology, that vacuum-based technology that I described earlier that was developed by a company called Lydia Health. 6 months after their 510(k) clearance. So 6 months after they actually had the license to put it on the market, they were acquired by a division of Merck for $240 million. Obviously, no ability to generate what I would consider to be true market traction over that period. If you talk to obstetricians, it was so new. But nonetheless, it sort of shows the appetite and the potential in the market when you reach that particular milestone. Yep.
That exit for 261 million, how much did that company raise prior to that?
I believe they had raised about $20 million to bring the product to market.
What are you guys looking to raise? What kind of, can you mention valuation?
So we're looking to raise about $3.5 million on a $20 million valuation. We've already raised $1 million towards that. That funding is basically take us to the same milestone, 510(k) clearance.
How much was invested in the original technology?
In the original
Military technology.
So the investment to date for that, I mean, the original for the first product launch on the first iteration of that, we had about $5 million invested into with non-dilutive DoD grants. Over the course of the last decade that we've been developing the X technology, the military has invested approximately $20 million.
So about 25 million in non-dilutive equity?
Right, right.
There are a lot of UN-related, interest in this kind of thing, and companies that have gone through the UN and foundations. So I would assume you're in the middle of that ecosystem.
We are in that ecosystem, but I believe, my personal belief is you have to have a robust, successful commercial company. That ecosystem obviously has a lot of challenges with it. So we view it as a market opportunity for sure. I mean, there's actually, but first and foremost, you start with a robust commercial product that is successful. That gives you, I think, the platform and the foundation, the financial foundation to go and enter into some of those low and middle income markets where you are, you can make money at it and you're doing some good, but the economics are different. There's no question.
Well, I mean, yeah, given that it's only 100 mil market cap for the whole market.
Right. But,
so, and you had help from Gates.
Right.
So it seemed to me you would want to be kind of trying to find middle ground from all of these different sources to get enlightened funding rather than
absolutely
money return.
Absolutely. And we don't envision that there's a need to have two different devices. It's not like here's the version that's there and here's the version that's here. I mean, that may be an approach that sort of evolves out of this, but we don't believe that's necessarily the case. We think that the device, as we're developing it, will have the potential to be successful in both those environments. And ergo, the funding that would come in the non-dilutive funding is, yeah.
Last thing I'll say is just there's a lot of education, radio in developing country that work on health, work with ministers of health that are all going to be interested in this stuff. So can't hurt to, connect the dots there. See who has any money for you.
Absolutely. And certainly invite anybody. We appreciate any of those types of connections for that.